Tonight on Steelers Talk, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette's Gerry Dulac reports that Aaron Rodgers is likely returning to the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2026. I'll break down Gerry's reporting at the top of today's show. Then we'll get into an idea that's being floated around out there of what if the Pittsburgh Steelers trade for Vikings quarterback JJ McCarthy? Would that be a good idea? I'll let you guys know my take on that. And then Patrick Graham, the new defensive coordinator for the Pittsburgh Steelers, sat down with Missy Matthews for his first interview as the DC of the Black and Gold. Had some very interesting things to say that we'll cover at the end of today's show, so make sure you guys stick around. But next week, guys, our team will have boots on the ground here at Chat Sports at the Scouting Combine in Indianapolis next week, and we're going to get you guys extensive coverage all throughout Combine week. It's a big rumors week with a lot of these GMs and agents and all these different personnel all in one place. They're talking about contracts. They're talking about trades. It's where the NFL offseason really kicks off with everybody in the NFL all in one spot. So we're going to get you guys the latest rumors coverage as well as our coverage of Omar Khan's press conference, which will be next Tuesday, and all that great stuff. Everybody that the Steelers are meeting with, we will have all that coverage for you guys next week. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already for our in-depth coverage from Indianapolis. All right, so now let's get into Gerry Dulac's article today for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, where he claims that Aaron Rodgers is likely to return to the Pittsburgh Steelers, or at least he says he's more likely to return than to retire and leave the National Football League this offseason. This is what Gerry had to say in his article. The Steelers believe Aaron Rodgers could return for another season, and the process won't be as prolonged or cloaked in a cloud of mystery as it was last year. New coach Mike McCarthy is quietly doubling down on his stated desire to be reunited with the quarterback who helped him win 5 division titles and a Super Bowl in 13 seasons in Green Bay, according to team sources. Even though Rodgers said he signed with the Steelers because of Mike Tomlin, the resignation of the 19-year coach has apparently not dissuaded him from potentially playing again in 2026. Rodgers really enjoyed his teammates and was open and emphatic about letting them get to know him, beginning as far back as training camp. In turn, they responded to the former 4-time league MVP and produced a passing offense that averaged more yards and touchdowns than the previous season. But he especially loved winning a division title and getting back to the postseason again, even though the Steelers were ousted in the wildcard round by the Houston Texans. All that being said, the Steelers are not going to wait till June for Rodgers to make a decision, not like they did last season. Ideally, they would like to know by the start of free agency on March 11th what he intends to do, certainly before the start of April 23rd's draft. McCarthy wants Rodgers to return, and the signs are more likely than not that he will be back, even more so than last year at this time. So, I mean, with this reporting, and you guys know that Gerry Dulac might not be the most accurate reporter out there on the Pittsburgh Steelers, to say the least, so take this with a grain of salt, but he is somebody that the team does feed information to if they have a certain narrative that they want out there, and I do think that the Steelers want to make it known, we definitely want Rodgers back, and I think they want everybody out there in the world to know that, yeah, we're having conversations with Aaron and we think he's going to be back as our starting quarterback, and I think they're trying to get fans used to the vision that they have for this football team next year, which is led by Aaron Rodgers, who's going to be turning 43 in December as their starting quarterback. And, you know, I feel like this is going to happen at the end of the day, guys, and something that really tells me that Rodgers is interested in returning to the Steelers and not just retiring this offseason. From Tom Pelissero's report on Super Bowl Sunday, he said that Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy has had, quote-unquote, several conversations, not to mention he said that Rodgers has had a lot of conversations with other Steelers players like Cam Hayward, DK Metcalf, and more about a potential return. We've heard from Brooke Pryor and others that his body felt much better at the end of this past season than it did, obviously, in the last 2 seasons with the New York Jets, and he feels reinvigorated by his time here in Pittsburgh. So it sounds to me like Rodgers is leaning more towards playing. I would say retirement is still on the table. I mean, it's Aaron Rodgers. We just don't know what's in his mind until he comes out and says it himself, but it certainly seems to me that he's probably going to be returning for another season here in Pittsburgh, and I think Gerry Dulac's reporting here will end up being correct. And that sounds to me that Rodgers, definitely has legitimate interest in returning to the Steelers this year, and honestly, I think Rodgers is Pittsburgh's best QB1 option, at least for the short term heading into the first year of the Mike McCarthy era. Obviously, Rodgers is not a long-term solution. I think Steelers fans are kind of sick and tired of the older short-term option at quarterback. They want to go with more of a younger, longer-term option and take a risk at the quarterback position and not just go with another 35-plus-year-old quarterback, in this case a 40-plus-year-old quarterback, and run it back. But personally, guys, I think Rodgers, when you look at his profile, there's a pretty good case to be made that he is the best short-term solution to try and keep the Steelers competitive heading into the 2026 season. Obviously, he's got all the playoff experience in the world. I mean, he has more playoff experience than any other quarterback in the National Football League. I think he beats out Patrick Mahomes by just a couple of games. Also, players want him. It's been well reported that the Steelers players in the locker room that watch him practice every day and were his teammate last year, and those players want to win just as much as fans do. They want Aaron Rodgers to return and think that he's the guy that can help them win football games next year. Obviously, he still has high-end arm talent with a quick release, can throw it 70 yards in the air if needed. Also, he's a cerebral football mind. We've known this for many years. He's one of the smartest quarterbacks in NFL history. Got to have that cerebral football IQ to play in a Mike McCarthy offense. Also, he's not expensive at all. I mean, he would sign for probably somewhere between $10 and $15 million on a one-year deal. That's extremely affordable for a starting quarterback. And then also the mentorship aspect of, bringing in younger quarterbacks and having them learn from a guy like Aaron Rodgers is extremely valuable, for Will Howard and any other rookie or any other younger quarterback they would bring in free agency. So I think Rodgers can actually be better than he was in his first year here in Pittsburgh in a year two here with the Steelers. Not only does he have added continuity with some of the players like DK Metcalf, Pat Freiermuth, and others that he didn't have in his first year here in Pittsburgh, but also Mike McCarthy is an upgrade from Arthur Smith, in my opinion, in this offense in terms of the offensive play caller. And then also, I fully expect Omar Khan to have a better wide receiver room built for Aaron Rodgers next year than what he had last year. But not everyone agrees with me on that. In fact, Benjamin Solak from ESPN, one of their NFL analysts, does not want to see Aaron Rodgers back with the Pittsburgh Steelers here in 2026. This is what Benjamin has to say as the counterpoint to pretty much what I've been saying. I should not be forced to watch Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy in 2026. I did my watching of Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy in the late 2010s. I watched it fall apart, and I watched the offense lose its fastball, and I watched Rodgers just become like a silent protester within the offense, just calling the plays that he wanted to. There's no reason to do it again. Rodgers, at this point in his career with his play style and then his athletic limitations, it's really hard for him to be a successful quarterback. He's going to have 2 to 3 games a year where he's just like so sharp and so correct that he just dices up insurgents of bad defense. But in general, he just cannot create outside of structure. Among 35 quarterbacks, he was like dead last in terms of explosive play rate on extended dropbacks. Time to throw is one of the fastest in football. Air yards to the sticks is one of the lowest in football. He's a point guard. He's a pop gun shooter. He cannot do things down the field. He cannot do things outside of the pocket. He'll be running a Mike McCarthy offense that is extremely well known in structure. Defenses have been on these calls and on their checks for a long time. It will not go well. So Solak said there that he thinks that Rodgers is a point guard and a pop gun shooter and he can't do anything down the field. But I think this is a chicken or the egg argument here, guys. Is it the quarterback that's incapable of throwing the ball downfield and being an efficient downfield passer? Or, is it the wide receivers not providing the quarterback enough downfield opportunities? I would argue it's the latter there, where this wide receiver room, guys, Steelers fans know this very well. This was not a good wide receiver room last year. In fact, it was pretty much definitely a bottom 3 wide receiver room, maybe the worst wide receiver room in football. And, DK Metcalf's really the only bona fide starter in that group. And when you only have one good receiver on your team, you guys know what defenses do in the National Football League. They double team the one good receiver. So that limited what DK Metcalf was capable of doing last year in this offense as well. And, if anything, I think when I look at the film and as somebody that watches this team and covers this team every day, I think, Aaron Rodgers' quote-unquote point guard style of play last year was more out of necessity than it's like, he has to play that way because he has physical limitations. No, he's still more than capable of throwing the ball down the field. It's just he didn't have a lot of downfield opportunities to throw the ball 10-plus yards down the field. And I think the way that he did decide to play, getting these quick passes out to DK Metcalf and Jaylen Warren and Kenny Gainwell and, playing methodically and getting the ball to playmakers out in space and, allowing them to run after the catch. I think that was a really smart brand of football. and I think it played to the strengths of what the Steelers did have on their roster last year instead of trying to force a square peg into a round hole and try throwing the ball downfield in an offense that didn't have any wide receiver talent on it outside of DK Metcalf. And despite that bottom three wide receiver room, Aaron Rodgers still got this offense to play at a pretty much league average level, over league average in points per game scored with 23.4, and then around league average in the metrics that you look at, EPA per play, success rate. So this offense was the best it's been in years here in Pittsburgh, and that was with one of the worst, if not the worst, wide receiver room in football. That's because Aaron Rodgers used his football intellect to get the ball out in space to his playmakers, read what the defense was trying to do to him, not force anything, and try and play smart football, which I would argue he did for the most part last year. You give him a better wide receiver room, and I think that you see his improvement, and I think you see the offense's improvement with the same quarterback under center heading into the 2026 season. So true or false? Let me know down there in the comment section. Aaron Rodgers can be better in 2026 than what he was in 2025. Give me a T for true or F for false. Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. For today's pin question, in just a second here, I'm going to tell you about our sponsor today. Well, I tell you about today's sponsor. Give me a T for true or F for false. And you guys have been asking me for merch opportunities here on Steelers Talk for multiple years now. We're finally getting into the merch game, and you guys can get this limited edition Steel City Drinking Team t-shirt on our website right now, chatsports.com/pitgreen. These t-shirts are only $29.99, and they are available only for a limited time only. These will only be available for about the next month before St. Patrick's Day, and my bosses tell me that the more of these that we sell, the more merch opportunities we're going to be able to get this offseason. So when the Steelers sign new players in free agency and the new players that they draft with the 12 draft picks they have in the draft this year, with the NFL draft coming up here soon, we can do some really cool merch stuff here on Steelers Talk over the next several weeks and months. So if you guys want those, make sure you get this t-shirt and show my bosses that we can push merch here on Steelers Talk. Chatsports.com/pitgreen is the link. It's down there in the comments and description of today's show if you guys want to get one today. Now we can shift our focus from Aaron Rodgers to another potential QB target for the Pittsburgh Steelers this year, especially if Rodgers retires, and that's JJ McCarthy, the former first-round pick, currently playing for the Minnesota Vikings. And that Minnesota Vikings fan base, it might be looking to get a new quarterback here this offseason. There's been some speculation that Kevin O'Connell might be bringing in a new full-time starting quarterback like a Malik Willis or a Kyler Murray, somebody that wouldn't just be competing with JJ McCarthy, but would be straight up replacing him as the starting quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings. And in that situation, I'm sure the Vikings would be very open to letting JJ McCarthy go in a potential trade. Now the question is, should and would the Pittsburgh Steelers be interested in JJ McCarthy and make him their next starting quarterback here in Pittsburgh, especially because we do have his former Michigan teammate Roman Wilson on the roster right now, and you can make an argument, hey, maybe JJ McCarthy can finally get Roman Wilson to play well here in the Steelers defense, or an offense, I should say. But for me, guys, the answer is a firm no on JJ McCarthy. I've never been a McCarthy guy. I always thought that the hype around him in the draft process a couple years ago was really driven by the national championship that they won at Michigan. But in my opinion, he was just surrounded by an elite supporting cast, a great run game, a terrific defense. He had some good receivers to throw to. He had Colston Loveland at tight end, and he didn't have to throw it all that often. I mean, there were some games where he only had to throw it 17, 16 times a game, and they would win by 30. That's a very, very easy path to go down. I also think he's got major issues with his throwing mechanics. I think he's got major issues with his pocket footwork. I think he's got major issues with his mental processing, and all of those came to a head last year when he was thrown into a situation where the Vikings had Super Bowl expectations last year with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and Brian Flores' defense and Kevin O'Connell calling plays, and JJ was a bottom three starting quarterback in the league. And I still think McCarthy has a long way to go before he's somebody that can compete in the NFL postseason. And at the end of the day, guys, my thinking on this is that if he couldn't work out with Kevin O'Connell, maybe the best offensive play caller and one of the best QB coaches in the league, got Sam Darnold to be a franchise-level quarterback, Justin Jefferson, probably the best receiver in football, and Jordan Addison, one of the best wide receiver twos. I mean, he was placed in a situation where most quarterbacks would dream of being placed in that offense with those kinds of weapons, with that defense to support him. And, he just wasn't good last year, man. And I know he's still young. I know he's still developing. It's still possible he could turn it around. But what exactly on J.J. McCarthy's film last year tells tells you that he can come here to Pittsburgh and win football games as this team's starting quarterback. I just don't see it, guys. I think he'd cost probably around a 4th-round pick, maybe a 5th-round pick if the Steelers are lucky. So let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. Would you trade for JJ McCarthy? This is a hard pass for me, but let me know what you guys think. A for accept or D for decline. And we'll finish up today's show here with new defensive coordinator here in Pittsburgh, Patrick Graham, who sat down with Missy Matthews of Steelers.com for his first interview as the defensive coordinator of the Black and Gold. PG says this about why he chose to come to Pittsburgh: the tradition of the Steelers as a defensive coach, to be able to come here and try to earn our place in that tradition. It's really near and dear to my heart, and I do not take it lightly. I love that answer from Patrick Graham, saying that he wants to earn his place in the pantheon of the Pittsburgh Steelers in terms of the history of the defensive side of the ball with this organization. I appreciate that he appreciates the history of the defensive side of the ball here in Pittsburgh. But also, I was very impressed with it. It was a fairly short interview on Steelers.com. It's about 7 minutes long. And the main takeaway that I took from it, guys, is that he's always searching for that competitive edge, and he's willing to be really adaptable to be able to find that edge and give his defenses that competitive edge on Sundays. This is what Graham had to say about that. People think grind just means we stay in the office for hours. We stay in the office as long as we have to stay in the office to get work done, but really the grind part is trying to find the edge. Can I find the edge not selfishly, but for the players? When you grind like that, it's searching for answers and ways for the players to be successful. I always think it's funny when people are like, who's a player's coach? The player the people that grind and try to find the information for the player to help him play better on Sunday. So I really like that answer from Patrick Graham, and I think this is exactly the mentality that we've needed, because I think under Teryl Austin and Mike Tomlin, it was very much, this is what we've always done, you're going to do it our way, and we're going to bring in players to fit our system, but also we're not really going to modernize, and we're going to put especially our inside linebackers in some really tough positions. And I think with a guy like Patrick Graham, he's being more than willing to be humble and look at his own stuff and say, okay, it's not about me, it's about the players, and how can I get these guys to be successful, because it's about those guys and their skill sets and what they do well, instead of trying to pigeonhole them into what I want. And I think that's exactly the mentality we've needed here in Pittsburgh, and I think it's the mentality that leads to some of the best defenses in football. I think it made Bill Belichick one of the best defensive minds in the history of the game, if not the greatest, and I think Patrick Graham's bringing that kind of mentality right here to the Steel City. What say you guys? Let me know down there in the comment section. Did Pittsburgh upgrade or downgrade at the defensive coordinator position? Type U if you think they upgraded over Teryl Austin, who, by the way, still doesn't have a job, and then type D if you guys think that we downgraded with Patrick Graham as our new defensive coordinator. All right, that'll be it for today's show, guys. We're going to continue to get you guys great content on the Pittsburgh Steelers all throughout the weekend. If we get a decision from Rodgers, Ponzi and I will be going live when that decision comes down, and of course we'll have that extensive coverage from the Combine next week in Indianapolis for you guys. So click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Till next time, guys. Here we go, Steelers.